In the past year, the actions of police officers, regardless of their race, have been under intense scrutiny. In this week's in-depth conversation, moderator Susan Cadot hears from black officers to see how they are responding to calls for systemic reform from groups including Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Rich. This has been an ongoing issue for the past few years, and we want to talk to some members of law enforcement today to find out where things stand now, have things calmed down. And joining me to have that discussion today is Deputy Chief Ricky Jackson with the Norman Police Department and Officer Sean Smith with the Lawton Police Department. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's just jump right in. What's it like to be a Black police officer in these times? We've seen so much racial unrest, and the racial issues are really a front burner topic right now. Deputy Chief, we'll start with you.
These are really, I think, interesting times. I see it as opportunistic times to where because of what's going on across the country, because of the perception of law enforcement by those marginalized in the community, I feel that these incidents that are going on across the country have been a springboard for us to be able to come out and have honest conversation about not only what's going on between law enforcement and those in the community, but also what's going on across the country. And so even though they're trying times, there are also times of opportunity. And so I feel that by opening dialogue and having true and honest discussion with our stakeholders in the community, the people we serve in our community, it helps alleviate some of the fears and anxiety about what law enforcement does as a culture, and how we interact with those in our community. It gives us the opportunity to kind of explain some of these things and work through some of these issues. And I think on a larger issue, if we can fix it at this level, we can fix it across the country, the issues that are going on today.
Officer Smith, I want to come to you. Are you cognizant of the racial issues when you're out in the field? If you're apprehending or looking for a person of color, are you more cognizant of how you treat that person because of your skin color? Does that even come up for you?
No, ma'am. Something I like to live by is staying, firm, fair, and consistent. I treat everyone the same. So if I'm trying to apprehend somebody that's the same color as me, I treat them like everybody else. I understand that it may be a little traumatizing for him or her, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what they may or may not have did. But until I get that person in custody and I get the situation safe, I treat everyone the same.
So the issues that arise, have they impacted, and I'm going to stick with you, officer, have they impacted your police department in Lawton? The racial issues that have come up, the protests about George Floyd, what has happened there? Is that being addressed?
It'd be fair to say that what happened to George Floyd has affected every police department across the United States. I don't think that nobody can say that they have been touched in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But it's what we do, after that matters most. We really got to communicate further with the community, be more transparent, and just try to keep that two-way communication open.
Deputy Chief, we were speaking earlier, and you could have retired, and I think Officer Smith asked why you didn't, and you gave a really interesting answer to that. Can you share that with us?
Over the years, I've had lots of positive interactions with not only my officers, but those in my community. And when the protests of this summer started, and bear in mind, there's been protests throughout the years, but this summer was particularly egregious in what those across the country, us and those across the country, witnessed what happened in Minnesota. Took a lot of us aback in law enforcement. And so there was outrage in the community, and rightfully so. What they saw is not indicative of what we should be doing as a profession moving forward to provide service to people in our community and treat people safely and with respect. And what we saw appalled a lot of us across the country. So there were protests. There were protests that hit Norman. Norman's a very progressive community. We have a lot of people here that are very extremely educated, with lots of thoughts about what they think how we should do moving forward to help improve the lives for everyone in this community. And so when the protests hit Norman, And there were peaceful protests. People came out to express their anxiety and their fears and their thoughts about what's been going on across the country. I saw that our department, I can best serve my department by not retiring and taking my ball and going home and leaving the people in my community and my officers just hanging out to dry and having to navigate these waters on their own. I made a conscious effort to stay in the profession and to continue trying to work toward improving these lines of communication, alleviating some of the fears of those in our community, not only in the community, but also with our officers, and so I feel like I can help bridge that gap and provide BLAs on a communication between the two and help bring us together. So that's why I stayed here in Norman, and I'll continue to do so until, we're in a better position, again, not only the agency, but the community, in a better position to trust each other so we can, as a community and partners, move forward.
That's amazing.
Officer Smith, do you see that gap in law? And we see on the news, of course, the largest cities having these protests, but here in Oklahoma, we've been kind of immune to that. We don't have active or, really protests that get out of hand at all. What about in Lawton? Is it even more muted in Lawton? Did you see protests down there?
We have recently, ma'am. But I think we have a healthy mix of people who support law enforcement, who just kind of get behind us and stay with us. And then we have, people who feel like there are things that we can do better. So I feel like we have a healthy mix. For the most part, we do have very constructive and very good conversation on, both sides of the table to see what we can do better to come together, not as like a police department and as a community, but together as like a city.
Do people ask you, how can you do this job? How can you, when the police, law enforcement targets people of color? Has that ever been an issue for you? Has anyone ever said that to you?
Yes, ma'am. Unfortunately, some people who want to go down that rabbit hole, I guess, they already have their minds made up. So, as we kind of continue with that conversation, and of course, this is at work, this is on scene. So something probably is happening going on and they don't agree with what we're doing as law enforcement officers, which I understand. It normally takes a turn, and as I'm trying to explain things to them, if they don't agree with it, it turns to me getting called derogatory terms like Uncle Tom, race traitor, things of that nature, which, and they have their own opinion. I'm not mad at them for it. They don't see everything that we do. And sometimes it's hard to see it from their perspective because I am wearing the uniform right now. But I don't hold it against them. I understand that people are mad. These are very emotional times. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes it's hard to see, the right or the wrong, and people just see, a police officer that they think is doing the wrong thing.
Deputy Chief Jackson, what about you on this issue?
There's a saying amongst those in law enforcement, officers of color, that is, at times we feel like we're too black to be blue, too blue to be black. In other words, we're not accepted totally about the culture of which we are chosen a profession. We can be perceived a certain way, not because of our character, what we do, but because of how we look. And then in the community, like Officer Andrews was saying, in the community, you have those of us who look like us see us in uniform, and they think that we're selling out or we're part of the problem or we don't get it. And the reality of it is, and it's one of the questions that probably that we ask, this is a question that comes up a lot, is why we chose the profession we chose. The main reason why a lot of us are in this profession is because we grew up with certain experiences and we saw there's certain issues that need to be addressed. And you have a choice. You have a choice to pick your battle, to pick how you're going to go in and try to change a culture. And so a lot of us, and I say myself in particular, got in this profession to do just that, to help change the culture from the inside out, being that voice, being that ambassador to go in and tell all my officers, this is why we're being perceived a certain way. You have to understand the history first before you can find a solution. And so I educate my guys on the history of the sentiment. So when I'm called and suspected to be something that I'm not by people who look like me, I understand where it comes from. So my anxiety level is a lot less. I don't feel like I'm the victim. I understand why law enforcement perceived a certain way. There's historical reasons for that.
I'm sure you've seen so much change over the past 3 decades. Have you yourself faced discrimination before you became a police officer and after?
Absolutely. You know, even now, there's things that are people see you a certain way despite what you've done. You know, they still see you a certain way. But I don't allow that stuff to affect how I do my professional job. You know, I don't allow personal feelings to play into that. We have jobs to do, and that's provide service to those in our community. You know, and as a leader, my job is to lead by example. You know, to work with my officers to help them understand these things. You know, and vice versa. I learn from them. It's not a one-way street. The shift I've seen over the last few decades in law enforcement, you know, when I got hired on, you know, back in 1986, you know, the warrior mindset is what we needed, you know, to survive the streets. You know, we understood that, you know, it's us, you know, and we didn't take care of each other. You know, we can be assaulted or hurt or harmed by someone, you know, with nefarious thoughts and ideas toward us. And so the mindset of, by all means, we protect what we do and protect us and protect each other. That has shifted, you know, and it shifted in the Norman Police Department a number of years ago, where to get back to a guardian mindset, not the warrior mindset. So in other words, you don't see people everyone as a threat around every corner. We don't treat people a certain way. You treat people with respect. Now, if a person's actions will then rely on how we have to interact with you, but it's driven by your actions of what you're doing. So we don't go into with that mindset from the start. Like I came up, I started out, you know. Now it's more, you know, how can we provide the service? What can we do? It's not us above everybody else. It's everybody else. And then we know what we got into this profession is to keep other people safe. And so I like the shift that I'm seeing in the culture of law enforcement today. There's a lot of people here, a lot of officers who work this job every day. They put their lives on the limb every day to protect people above and beyond themselves. You know, I can give you story after story after story of heroism that I see not only in Norman PD, but across the country where officers do that. Are we perfect? No, there's some law enforcement as a culture, we have a lot of work to do. And there are those in my profession, in my agency, that I see that are willing to put the strap on the boots and put on the gloves and get to work, you know, and
Right.
work toward a better environment for everyone involved.
I want to go to Officer Smith for a moment. I didn't ask you, how long have you been a law enforcement officer?
For 3 years.
For 3, oh, you're brand new.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like it? Is it what you thought it would be?
Yes, I love it. It's something that I always wanted to do. It's one of the reasons why I got out of the Army, switched from active to reserve, is because I wanted to pursue law enforcement. You know, probably around the time that I joined, it was a whole lot of tension between, you know, the country and police officers as a whole. And I felt that, you know, if I wanted to make a change, then, you know, you can't really sit back and watch it on the news or watch that guy in the community do it by himself, that you know, that patrol officer that patrols that beat. And I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to help, you know, make that change. I wanted people to see that, you know, people of my color can do this job and, you know, bridge that gap. So that's what I'm committed to.
We don't have much time left, but I do want to give each of you a final word. And Officer Smith, I'll stay with you. Is there something that you wish the population knew about police officers that you'd like to share?
Yes, I would want them to know that, you know, when we put this uniform on, I know I said this before, but that we are coming into the communities to help. We're not trying to oppress you. We don't put this uniform on every day to just go and arrest people. We're in there we're in your communities to affect change. That's what we want to do. We're trying to make the community safer for us, our families, for them, and for their families.
All right. And Deputy Chief, what about you? Any final words for the folks in Oklahoma?
I would hope they understand and take patience in knowing and take heart in knowing that the majority of people, men and women that do this profession, they're in this culture, are doing it for the right reason. They're doing it to help those in their community and help people, you know, and so that's why we do this job. So just understand that. It's kind of like what Officer Andrew said earlier, he was talking about when we contact you on the street, don't assume we're a certain way. You know, at least let the person's actions be live, you know, and reinforce whatever your thought is, if it's whatever affirmation you have thinking, but give the person an opportunity to show you that they're really here to help you, and that's what our primary responsibility is. And most of us that put on this uniform, we do that every day, 24/7, 7 days a week. So I'm not making excuses for the bad characters. I'm just saying, because they're out there too, and we're doing what we can in our culture to flush them out of our culture. So, are we perfect? No. Yeah, but we're doing the best we can. We'll continue to do what we do.
Deputy Chief Jackson, Officer Smith, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us and sharing your valuable time with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.